turned themselves into really good Germans and somehow or another eradicated their genetics, which somebody decided were all important. Yeah. Absurd? We're in the realm of the absurd here. So try this. I don't know what they told you when you were in grade school. Some of you were in grade school, or elementary school as it's now called, okay, a lot more recently than me. But when I went through, when they did the little Thanksgiving Day acknowledgement of the fact that there had been Indians around once upon a time, okay, with their little turkey feather Indian impersonators and their little construction paper black and white cutouts of pilgrim suits so you could do the first Thanksgiving in class, they said, you know, North America, time the pilgrims were here, there were 1 million Indians. Well, what does the grade school teacher? That was the official anthropological estimate of the population of North America, north of the Rio Grande. Funny how North America starts at the Rio Grande and runs north. I always thought Mexico was part of North America, so they taught me in geography class, but then when I got over to history class and they had their 15 minutes on Indians for the year.
Oh.
Yeah. You must have had the same teacher, huh? Probably so. On the other hand, probably not, just saying exactly the same thing, eh? But there's a little geopolitical consideration there. Everybody south of that line speaks Spanish. In fact, south of the line, they call the Rio Grande the Rio Bravo. It's not even got the same name for the river. But that, you'll see consistently, is how they do the count. You start at the river, separating the United States from Mexico, and you run all the way north to Baffin Island. And then you add in Greenland just for fun. I don't know if Greenland knows that it's part of North America, but for this purpose it is, okay? And they did this very scientifically. That's how you always understand that whatever we believe outside that box of Western science has got a better answer because it is science, you see. It's not just what people remember or say. We've got a scientific method. Well, anybody wants to check out the scientific method of how they did this, grab up a copy of Francis Jennings' Invasion of America. He's got a whole chapter in there called The Widowed Land where he talks about how they falsified the data for about 5 consecutive generations, just cut it in half for convenience sake. No research going into this at all. And then you get the anthropological estimate, which is done in the first one by Mooney, who takes all the regional histories that are at sort of the top of the charts as being the most credible, takes their estimate of regional Indian population at the outset of the invasion, okay, makes a column, he adds it up. That's his anthropological field research, and it says it appears to be about 1.1 million. Al Prober, the heir apparent, I mean, you have to be fair to Mooney, I guess. I don't know why, but to be fair, he said this is a tentative estimate, and then he promptly died, and they published this thing posthumously, so I don't know that he would have done any more with it, but if he would have done any more with it, he didn't get a chance because they buried him first. Al Prober's supposed to take over as the reigning American Indianist anthropologist, and he's all outraged saying, you know, these scurvy diggers that I've been studying my entire career couldn't possibly have had a material cultural base sufficient to support a population at large, so he did no field work at all either, and simply made the estimate by cutting 10% from the total straight down the line. So he comes in a little under 1 million. And the Smithsonian, great edifice of science that it is, does the scientific thing, splits the difference so they didn't have to discredit either of them, and it becomes magically 1 million. What happens when you apply science? As Henry Dobbins did, and as Cook and Bora and some others have done, and what would the science be? Science would be what? Anybody have occasion to fly over a place where there used to be a village, where there used to be longhouses a couple hundred years ago, or whether there were regular winter camps out on plains or something like that? Seen the aerial photographs? You can still see. I live outside Boulder, Colorado. Just south of there is a regular winter camp for Cheyennes. You fly over, you can still see the teepee rings. There hasn't been a Cheyenne teepee there since 1864 at the lake, well, earlier than that, 1861 too. But you can still see where they were. Okay? Well, this guy, Henry Dobbins, gets all interested in Timucuan. Timucuan, for those of you who don't know, which probably most of you, pretty much the panhandle of Florida. Okay? And you can see where the fields had been and areas where they weren't. And you've also got archival records from the Spanish priests that were in the area. And the Spanish priests were busy writing down all this stuff, both so they could feed Christian Indians and also for potential export, that is to say economic purposes. They were coding everything. So you see where the fields were, and they've got records of how many acres or hectares or whatever were in cultivation and what the crops were. And from the military records, you can get fairly good meteorological information. So now you know the soil type, because the soil is still there. So you got soil quality, you've got the quantity of soil, you've got the weather conditions, you've got the crops. You can compute an annual yield off that. And you can take the annual yield of the various foodstuffs and you can divide it by the average requirement of a human being to live through a year. Divide the yield by the human being, the daily requirement, and you get a total of what the population wants that could be sustained. Okay? You follow? This isn't perfect, but it is something resembling a scientific method. Did the computation, came up with 830,000 for Timucuan. That's before the panhandle. There's 830,000 people there growing crops. That's almost the entire Smithsonian total for North America. So let's see. Let's speculate. It was a really, really cold winter one year, and all the Indians in North America went to Pensacola for vacation in spring. They liked it so much they just stayed. Yeah, so it's a wholly vacant continent available for Europeans to come in and teach civilization to who? Oh, sorry about Europeans. I just thought maybe I'd pronounce that kind of degree of precision that Europeans usually pronounce indigenous names. Shit happens. Well, he thought that was kind of odd and really not the explanation, so took a look at Piedmont, hung up the Atlantic coast and came up with another 1.3 million, I think it was. Looked at the Missouri Valley and came up with 800,000. Now, I'm not gonna run you through the whole thing, but he came up with a maximal possible total based on the available evidence of 18.5 million people, which is only 1,850% the official. Any graduate students who are still hanging in at this point, you know, try to get off of your computations by 1,850% to see what happens to your doctorate. Okay? But in this cycle, you get promoted to great Smithsonian anthropologists when you're wrong by that far. And they write you up in the golden history of North American anthropology. Okay, you got some other people who looked at this, and Dobbins, to be fair about it, didn't say there were 18.5 million Indians. He just said, based on the evidence, there could have been that many. You got another guy, Russell Thornton, and there's problems with his work too. But he did say, and rightly so, I'm not so much interested in how many Indians there could have been. I'm interested in how many Indians there probably were. So he recomputed the numbers, adding mathematical weights to cultural factors, including the idea that Indians probably would not have basically saturated the land to carrying capacity and then tried to sustain that there would have been reasons that they would have maintained population levels lower than what the land at a maximum could sustain. So you end up with something like 12 million